end of
a
Biden,
proper fascist.
Here's what I'm saying.
but at the end of Biden, like, we don't know 4 years out. Right?
We don't know anything in terms of like although I will say I think 4 years of Biden could totally lead to 8 years of Josh Hawley. I don't think that's like a fantasy scenario, but we don't know.
I don't know that we could get 4 years out of Biden.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it could
3
be like
months of Joe Biden.
Kamala Harris comes in
Yeah,
and she
could
just
lead
goes
to
like,
3 years.
surprise, I've been reading a lot more of my dad's writing than you thought. And I've had to,
That's the most optimistic scenario
that's
I've
what I'm
heard
saying. Like,
ever.
no, that's not going to happen.
The only centrist that I have a certain personal liking for secretly embraces her father's legacy. I'll live off of that fantasy for a day or two. But I think that I guess my point, and it's really genuinely like, you know, I think that there's some really important work that people can do inside shows like this that are actually important for the left. But my thing is, I just don't. There's one question of Bernie making a big play like that, which I think he should do, because I think things are getting extremely grave one way or another. Okay. And I think we cannot, where I would push back on you is not like, I think the merits of harm reduction voting are never going to go anywhere. Right. I also think that the idea that it's time to, if you have actual power, I don't think you should be writing a check you can't cash. But if Bernie thinks he has several million people and thinks he can threaten them enough to scare them, I think it's worth a risk, because I think we're in moonshot time right now.
Absolutely.
But more generally, I guess what I'm saying is, at least for me, is I'm not even interested in, look, if somebody tells me I live in Michigan and F them and da-da-da-da-da, I'll give it 5 months to say, you know what, I think it's probably worth the off chance that they'll shut down the concentration camps to vote preventatively. I'm happy to say that.
I don't follow that.
I don't believe that Biden would shut down
I'm
the
saying
concentration
that
camps.
if
Somebody
somebody
lives in
tells me
Michigan?
in a swing state that they're thinking of voting against Biden, I'll take 5 minutes to give them the case that you're making.
Okay.
But to me, the preoccupation of where I'm at right now is, what are the actual questions and lessons and things that we need to figure out to make like the human project viable? And that sounds incredibly melodramatic, but I think that that's where we're at. I think across climate, I think across a whole slew of policies that were already, you know, this isn't just point scoring. Like, the Obama era was obscene for a lot of people who work for a living, people who struggle, people who, you know, what was allowed to happen with Silicon Valley and so on. This isn't just like us having various points on each other on Twitter. It's a critical mass of problems. And I look at Achille Mbembe's piece that he wrote before Trump was elected. The age of humanism is ending. And that is the predicament we're in. And the fact that Joe Biden is certainly not going to answer that is not just a question of degrees or speed or I want it to happen faster. It is a fundamentally different orientation. And so I'm going to have to ask myself, is it even viable, and what needs to be done to secure some type of democratic future? Not, you know, again, and I just, that's why I don't even want to spill a huge amount of hours about how people choose to vote or not, frankly, because to me it's not primary. If somebody, and I'll reiterate one more time to those people who are getting pissed, if somebody tells me I'm the one swing vote in a key swing state and F them all, I'll say, you know what, Biden might save 5,000 lives. I think that's totally fair point. But I think that argument and that frame, particularly for people who are absolutely immiserated, is, I certainly can't keep doing it. You know, I had someone very close to me, basically, if we weren't a little bit safer now, like, they would just be homeless right now. Like, they would just be done. And there is nothing structurally that Joe Biden and the leaders of the Democratic Party are going to do for that. And they hold clear contempt for those of us that care about those things. And, you know, I don't take it personally. It's not Warren self-care time, but it is have an analysis time. And I don't know what the answers are.
Yep. And we also have to remember, you know, most of the people who are going to stay home and not vote aren't going to be doing that because they heard me talking about it on a podcast. Like,
well, I know.
Most of the people who don't vote.
I think that's, I think that argument is like, you can't, we have to operate under the assumption that when we say things on this show, that it's going to have some impact. Because otherwise, then it's not even worth having the conversation.
That's why we're setting
Sure, but-
parameters.
We just have
That's
to-
why
Sure,
I'm
but
just-
there's a much larger number
trying to be
that
careful
we
here.
need to think about of people who don't vote and don't listen to podcasts. And they are some of the most oppressed people. And a lot of the most oppressed people also can't vote because they're immigrants or because they're incarcerated. So
Right.
that's definitely a limit to the kind of...
But that's different than saying, nobody's going to listen to me anyways, so I'm going to say
Sure.
this.
That's I only wanted to say that to like minimize the first thing that I was talking about and make a larger point about the people who don't vote and the people who are the most oppressed in this society. And that's why we can't center electoral politics as our primary thing, because you're leaving a lot of the people out who have the biggest stake in what happens and in the outcome. And I think we also need to remember that the way that we got the New Deal, which was a huge advancement in the material conditions, in the lives of working class people. It was also a class compromise. It was a concession given in a larger fight because there was revolutionary struggle in this country. They scared the crap out of the ruling class. It wasn't just, oh, I like that guy's policies, I'm going to vote for him and he's going to do them for me. These were concessions in a larger fight. And even as we invoke the names of popular New Deal policies, like the Green New Deal or Medicare, which we've had since 1965, we need to remember the larger piece of the puzzle and how we got those things in the first place. And that is a struggle that can continue and must continue no matter who's president.
But that is actually an argument, though, that you want Biden in office.
Paradoxical.
Because Herbert Hoover was not going to respond that way. You know, FDR didn't run on that, and he may have been, you know, there was probably like I don't know if he was there, contemporaneously, if there was an indication that he was open to something like that more than Joe Biden. I don't think Joe Biden has a terribly like strong ideological strain. I mean,
Have you read the Branko Marcic book on Yesterday's Man?
No.
I think I think the other problem with that comparison is I actually do think that the modern Democratic Party is actually profoundly ideologically wedded to this kind of third way politics. And the question that I would have for you, and it's I don't know, it's the very simple, like, because this is the dynamic that always happens. I remember when the Progressive Caucus, during the healthcare debate, they had a couple days where like, we're going to hold this up if we don't have a public option. But they could all bank everybody
during
the Obama administration, and the Obama could bank.
We have a different Progressive Caucus now than we did then.
Oh, I'm actually giving them credit, that old lame Progressive Caucus, from my perspective. But part of the dynamic, and I hate how the Obama administration handled healthcare. Fine, of course. But here's part of the dynamic. Joe Lieberman will sink the bill happily because he doesn't give a fuck, excuse my language, if tons of people die. Even your most big hack member of the Progressive Caucus, maybe not all of them, but I think a chunk of them have the mindfulness of what you're reiterating. Could be 2,000 lives, could be 3,000 lives. That matters. And that's progressives, caring about human life is a structural flaw in the exercise of power, in a way, and because even if the Democratic Party, I think, definitely has more people that are sort of generally on like the left, even if they voted for Biden, if we're going to take those polls seriously as an example. Certainly they do a very small group of affluent people who are like, never Trumpers or whatever. But part of the dynamic, in addition to their own, I think, very genuine and serious ideology, is that, they know that the Joe Liebermans won't vote for Bernie Sanders and they will screw everything over. And folks on the left a lot of them will get re-anchored in by just basic humanity arguments, which speaks well of the left, but it's hard for credibly threatening and exercising power. And I think that's a problem, which I absolutely don't know the answer to. I'm just putting in the mix that
Right.
it's a problem that Joe Biden probably knows that Bernie Sanders would not do that. I think, frankly, if you had a left that was this is the last thing I'll say. What frustrates me is get rid of all the tweets about how we're not going to be normal and all this stuff. Like, appeal to normies rhetorically across the board. Let go of the posturing woke and socialist and otherwise. That's my view, even as a socialist. And then conversely, actually have some of the like attitude and disposition of like, no, actually, we won't. And deal with that and sit with that. And,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm looking at.
That
things.
makes a lot of sense. I think we also need to take a page from the French here when they had a choice between a horrible neoliberal centrist and a crazy racist lady member of the far right, right? The motto was vote for Macron, oppose him from day one. And that's what they've been doing. And he has responded like a fascist and shown his true colors, putting down these uprisings with riot cops. Perhaps he was a little better than Le Pen would have been, maybe not. But I think they did the right thing. And now we're seeing uprisings all over France. We've seen the Yellow Vest movement. We've seen massive labor strikes that incorporate all parts of French society. So, French got advanced capitalism before we did, and maybe they're going to be the first ones to advance to something else. But I think we need to look at our French friends and take notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess to me, the question is like, how do you, I mean, obviously, I think there should be a lot more labor action in this country, just broadly speaking, regardless who's the president. But to what extent do you have what is the best way to maintain and grow the power that is behind, Bernie Sanders? I mean, he is not going to be there, to lead it for much, and it's not clear quite yet who are going to be the heirs to that movement, or, are going to step up and fill that void. I mean, we can take some guesses, but the point is, how do you maintain that strength, still play out as much of a chance as you have in this election, and maintain it? That's the balance. Right now, that is the very real question that, theoretically they're asking in Burlington right now, which is, how much do we go at Joe Biden and at what cost to the movement? You can't say, if there's a 35% chance that we can win this, but the only way to get to that 35% is to essentially light our power on fire.
Maybe that's the plausible threat, though. Maybe because, look, nobody's going to believe that Bernie won't support Joe, but maybe it actually is as simple as, Joe, I'm going to keep running because it's really important, and I expect certain things from you. We'll see. And not just platform things, but actual things. But here's the choice. I am willing to risk absolutely eviscerating you the next several weeks. And you can blame me and blah, 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 blah. But we're still running against each other. It's not like you guys haven't eviscerated me. I'll run every ad imaginable. I'll accept it. MSNBC's upset, whatever. I don't care. Or if we get some things down in writing, we get some actual stuff going on, we can run the next several weeks, but I'll keep calling you my friend and I'll keep saying you could win. Maybe that's where the plausible threat is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And